Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing a hypothetical 2028 election prediction. In this one I just did a video a few days ago talking about Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, and she's visiting the state of New Hampshire, helping out Democratic Representative Chris Pappas, who is running for Senate, and it got me thinking about what a 2028 prediction could look like if she were to enter this race and run against Vice President J.D. Vance. So this would be an interesting scenario. Klobuchar is someone that is often perceived as much more of a moderate. She comes from the state of Minnesota, obviously a very important state in the Midwest and the Rust Belt that plays a very important role in presidential politics. So I thought it'd be fun to do a scenario for 2028. Starting out with the states I think would be safe for Klobuchar and Vance. I'm going to start with Klobuchar and go through the states that I have as safe for her. Starting with Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii, all these states I expect to be 15% margin of victory or more for Klobuchar. I also think the state of Colorado would also likely be over 15 points in this election scenario. Washington, D.C. I think would go safe, as well as the state of Maryland, Delaware. New Jersey, it's possible it goes back under or over 15, but I think the trend is going to be keeping it under there for now, so we're going to leave it off of safe Democrat. But Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Vermont would all go safe, as well as Maine's 1st Congressional District. All I think would be safe states for Klobuchar. The state of Illinois, I think, would go back to being a safe state, as well as the state of New York. Those would get Klobuchar up to 177. Now we're going to go to the safe states for J.D. Vance. A lot of these were safe states for President Trump as well, like Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, the state at large, and I do believe it is, I want to get this right, be totally sure here, it is the 3rd Congressional District that is the safe one. 3rd District would be safe for Vance. Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina would all be safe for Vance versus Klobuchar. This puts Klobuchar at 177, Vance at 121. We do now have a bunch of states that I think could be safe, but I think just narrowly based off 2024 results and anticipating the 2028 election environment would be a little bit under 15%, so it would be in the likely category. And for Amy Klobuchar, I'm going to start with the state of Maine, which I think would be around a 13-point victory or so for Klobuchar. That would be likely Democrat. I think the state of New Mexico would also be in this similar category where we saw Joe Biden in 2020, I believe, win the state by 10.8%. I think we may see something similar in that regard for Klobuchar in this election scenario. The state of New Jersey, I do think Amy Klobuchar would win it by more than 10 points, but I don't think we're going to see it break 15% of the vote. Virginia, I think, would also be something that'd be very similar to this. Klobuchar would get up to 211 versus J.D. Vance in that regard. The state of New Hampshire, where Amy Klobuchar is currently in right now, as I mentioned, I think Klobuchar is one of the Democratic candidates who would do very well in the state of New Hampshire. I think she would win New Hampshire by around 10%, if not more, in the state come 2028 if this were to be the matchup versus J.D. Vance. Also, Klobuchar's home state of Minnesota, it was almost a likely Democratic win in 2024, was about a 7-point win in 2020. I think Klobuchar breaks 10% and beats J.D. Vance in Minnesota by the likely Democratic margin. Now we have some states that I think still go likely Republican for J.D. Vance, one of these being the state of Alaska being likely Republican, the state of Florida I think would also be likely Republican, and the state of Texas. Despite Amy Klobuchar being a stronger general election candidate, I think that she would not do as well in the South as she would in the Rust Belt, so I think Texas would remain as likely Republican. Now you have two states like Iowa and Ohio, which I think could both remain likely Republican, but the margins would be a lot smaller. In 2020, there are about 8-point wins for President Trump versus Joe Biden. 2024, 13-point wins and 11-point wins for Trump versus Harris. I think Klobuchar would definitely cut into some of these margins here, where I don't think Vance would do as well as Trump did in 2024 and perhaps maybe not even 2020, but I do think they would both narrowly remain in the likely Republican categories in this election scenario. Now we get into the main areas that are going to be contested. Oh, I did want to throw also Nebraska's 1st District and likely Republican as well. Now we have some of the more competitive areas, and I'm going to start with Nebraska's 2nd District, which did vote by 4.7% for Kamala Harris in 2024. I think Amy Klobuchar would win it by more than 5 points, by around 6.5 to 7 or so. That would put her in the likely Democratic category for that district. For Maine's 2nd District, however, this is one where Donald Trump won it by about 9 points in 2024 after he won it by about 7 points, 7.5 in 2020. I do think Vance would hold on and win here, but I think it would be by a smaller margin of around 6 points or so in this scenario. This puts Vance at 219, Klobuchar 226. Now we're going to start on the western part of the country in the state of Nevada. Nevada ended up voting for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris by 3.1%. In 2024 and 2020, Joe Biden won it by 2.4% against Donald Trump. It is without a doubt that Nevada also went blue for Clinton in 2016. Nevada has shifted towards the Republican direction and very well could go Republican again in 2028. But in this scenario of Klobuchar versus Vance, I actually do think Nevada very narrowly goes to the Democratic side, right around being a 1-point victory or under. I'm going to start it out as a lean Democrat, though, in between 1 and 5. I think she would win it by about 1.5 to 2 points in this election scenario. Now the state of Arizona. Arizona, which very narrowly voted for Joe Biden in 2020, 49.36 to 49.06. 2024, President Trump won the state by 5.5% against Kamala Harris. It swung massively back to the Republicans. In 2028, for Klobuchar versus Vance, I do think Vance would hold on and win it again, but in this scenario, I think it falls under 5 points. Vance wins Arizona by around 3.5 to 4 points in this scenario. The state of Georgia. Georgia's a fascinating state. It voted in 2024 for Donald Trump by 2.2% against Kamala Harris. After in 2020, it voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump by 0.24%. 2016 voted for Trump by 5.1%. Georgia's one that I'm very much on the fence with here because this is a state where African-American turnout is going to be very key, and there are a lot of Democratic candidates that could get a lot of African-American turnout. I'm not sure Amy Klobuchar is necessarily one of those Democrats to do so, so I'm not sure she'd be able to get the vote percentages out like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did, but I also think J.D. Vance probably would not do as well in a lot of the rural areas and suburban areas that President Trump did either. So I'm going to very narrowly give the state of Georgia to J.D. Vance by under 1%, but I could certainly imagine Amy Klobuchar winning this state. The state of North Carolina voted for Donald Trump by 3.2% in 2024. It voted for Donald Trump by 1.3% in 2020 versus Joe Biden, and it voted for Donald Trump by 3.7% against Hillary Clinton in 2016. It's been lean Republican 3 elections in a row, but I do think this is a state where the suburban areas, especially outside of Charlotte and outside of Raleigh, we could see Amy Klobuchar make some significant inroads in the state. And maybe if Roy Cooper is elected senator in 2026 in North Carolina, may move something a little bit in North Carolina and shifting more towards the Democratic side. But for now, I do think in this scenario, J.D. Vance would hold on and win the state of North Carolina by under 1%, right around that 0.9% margin. This puts Vance at 262, Klobuchar 232, so this means the Rust Belt will decide the election. And this is the good news for Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar coming from the state of Minnesota in a very impressive victory in the Senate race in 2024, where she won by 15.7%, a safe Democratic margin. She may be one of the better Democratic candidates to appeal to the Rust Belt in 2024. Wisconsin voted for Trump by 0.86% after 2020, where it voted for Joe Biden by 0.63%, and it voted for Trump by 0.76% in 2016. So 3 elections in a row now, the Wisconsin has been decided by under 1%, but in Klobuchar versus Vance, I actually think Wisconsin very narrowly breaks that trend and goes about 1.5% for Amy Klobuchar margin of victory in the state. Now the state of Michigan. Michigan voted more Republican than Wisconsin in 2024 for Trump versus Harris, 1.4%, but in 2020, Joe Biden won the state by 2.8% against Donald Trump. 2016, Trump won the state by 0.22%. I think Michigan has also certainly trended Republican more in the last few years, and it's not as blue as it was in 2020, but I do think, again, Klobuchar will be able to break 1% margin of victory around that 1.5 to 2 point margin and go for Amy Klobuchar. This puts her at 257, Vance 262, and I think the election will once again be decided by the state of Pennsylvania, which voted for Donald Trump in the largest margin of the 3 Rust Belt states by 1.7% for Trump over Harris. 2020, the state voted for Biden over Trump by 1.2% in 2020 and voted for Trump by 0.72% in 2016 for Trump versus Clinton. In this scenario, I think, again, Amy Klobuchar is able to do better in a lot of the suburban areas like Bucks County and Lehigh and Northampton than J.D. Vance is able to do, not able to match President Trump's margins in this election environment, which is probably going to be more Democratic friendly than 2024 was more Republican friendly. Amy Klobuchar, I think, breaks that margin and wins Pennsylvania by around that same 1.5 to 2% number. This gives Klobuchar the win at 276 to Vance at 262. Vance able to run a close competitive election, including some very close calls in North Carolina and Georgia, but Amy Klobuchar able to run up the numbers in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, as well as hurt the margins in North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. So that's how I think this election for Klobuchar versus Vance would go, but I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave your thoughts and comments down below. I can't wait to read and check all those out. Also, make sure to hit like and subscribe as I post multiple videos every single day that you're not going to want to miss. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.